Welcome back. We are going over section 2-1, multiplying integers. This is the first lesson in our second section on operations with integers. As with addition and subtraction of integers, multiplying integers also follows certain rules. Unlike addition and subtraction, the rules are a lot simpler. We can take a look at this chart. This chart to the right gives me all the possible scenarios when I'm multiplying integers. We can have two positive numbers, positive and a positive, and when we do that, we get a positive answer. We could also have two negative numbers, a negative and a negative, which also gives us a positive answer. So a rule we like to say is, if the two numbers have the same sign, then our answer is positive. We could also have a situation where we have a negative and a positive, or a positive and a negative. Okay, two numbers with different signs, one being positive, one being negative. Whenever we have different signs, that answer is negative. Okay, so same signs, the answer is positive. Different signs, the answer is negative. Okay, when we're solving problems, multiplying integers, the first thing we always want to do is determine our sign. Okay, we multiply our numbers normally, and we rewrite our answer with the correct sign. Let's take a look at a few examples of this. So let's take a look at our first example. Remember, when you see two numbers separated by no sign in parentheses, that tells me that we're going to multiply. As we move further on into our math and the rigor of the math gets a little higher, you just won't see the multiplication sign uses an X anymore. Typically, there's no sign between the two numbers, or there's a dot to show that multiplication is happening. So in this first problem, it's really saying negative 15 multiplied by 5. So the first thing I want to do, let's say this is step 1, is look at my signs. I have a negative and a positive. One negative, one positive. Anytime I have different signs, my answer is negative. So I know the answer to this problem will be a negative number. And then I just do 15 times 5, which is 75. So my answer is negative 75. My example in B, I have negative 11 multiplied by negative 4. A negative multiplied by a negative. Signs are the same, so my answer is positive. And then I just do 11 multiplied by 4, which is 44, and the right answer gets written down as positive 44. C, we have a negative 22 and 0. You should remember that anytime we multiply a number by 0, the answer is 0. Okay, I wrote down 0. I don't care about the signs because 0 is neither positive nor negative, so I just leave it as 0. Okay, negative 0, not a number. We don't write negative 0, we just write it as 0. Okay, sometimes we end up with problems where there are more than one multiplication problem or more than two terms, more than two numbers that we are multiplying together. Let's take a look at an example of that. So in this example, we have more than three terms. We have 4 terms, right? Each one of these numbers is considered a term. If we want to figure out how to solve those, we work them from left to right. Order of operations tells us when we have multiplication or division or both of them together, we work them from left to right. So the first thing we do is 7. Negative 7 multiplied by 2 gives you negative 14. Negative times a positive. Then you take negative 14 multiplied by negative 3. Took my answer from the first question and multiplied it by the next number or next expression term in my expression. Negative 14 multiplied by negative 3 gives me positive 42. And I have one number I still haven't used. I take that number and I multiply it by negative 2. Positive times a negative gives me a negative. 42 multiplied by 2 gives me 84. And that's my solution. Okay. As you start to understand or see this and you see the patterns, if you have an odd number of negative signs, like in this problem we have 3 negative signs. Okay, if you have an odd number of negatives, the answer is always going to be negative. Okay, if you have an even number of negatives, your answer will be positive. And this is because for every negative and negative that you match up, you get a positive. So if you have an even number of them, that means you have 1 or 2 negatives to come together and make a positive each time. They're in pairs. Okay, pause the video, try the next section on your own, come back to the video and I will go over the answers with you. Okay, hopefully you paused the video, you got a chance to go over these practice problems. I'm just going to quickly go through and answer these. Number 1, I have negative 4 times negative 5. Negative times a positive is a negative. 4 times 5 is 20. Number 2, 8 times negative 7. Positive times a negative gives me a negative. 8 multiplied by 7 is 56. Number 3, negative 1 multiplied by 12. Negative times a positive. Opposite signs give me negative. 12 times 1 is 12. Number 4, negative 12 times negative 12. Negative and negative give me a positive. 12 times 12, 144. 15 times 3, they're both positive, so my answer is positive. That's just 45. Negative 11 multiplied by negative 10. Negative times a negative gives me a positive. 11 times 10, anytime I multiply by 10, I just add a 0 to my number. 110. Number 7, 0 times negative 8. Anything multiplied by 0 gives me 0. Oops. Number 8, 3 times negative 44. Positive times a negative gives me a negative. 3 times 44 gives me 132. Sorry about the shaking. Number 9, negative 1 times negative 1. First off, I have an odd number of negatives, so I know my answer is going to be negative. If I wasn't sure, negative 1 times negative 1 gives me positive 1. I take that answer and multiply it by negative 1. My answer is negative 1. Okay, anytime I multiply by 1, 1 by 1 by 1 by 1, doesn't matter how many times I do it, my answer is always going to be 1. Number 10, negative 3 times 4 gives me negative 12. I take that answer and multiply it by negative 10. Negative and negative give me a positive. 12 times 10, 120. And number 11, 32 and negative 1 gives me negative 32. Positive and negative gives me negative. And then I take that number and multiply it by 12. Negative times a positive gives me a negative again. And 32 times 12 is 384. Hopefully you understood your signs, you got all your signs correct. And if there's a problem, maybe it was somewhere in your multiplication. But just remember the rules, okay? If I have the same sign, my answer is positive. Different signs, the answer is negative. If you're still confused about anything, please contact me. Leave a comment. Do whatever you have to do.